Canada is a country defined by distance, climate, and resilience. From the windswept Yukon to the frozen expanse of Nunavut and the rugged coasts of Labrador, the nation's geography shapes every decision about its defense. Protecting a territory so vast requires aircraft that are not only advanced, but also dependable, affordable, and capable of thriving where most machines simply cannot. And in recent years, a surprising contender has captured the attention of Canadian defense analysts, engineers, pilots, and taxpayers alike. Sweden's Gripen E. At first glance, it may seem unusual that a Scandinavian fighter jet could be a serious option for a country the size of Canada. But when you look closer, especially through the lens of Canadians aged 40 to 65, people who value practicality over flash, long-term reliability over political theater, the Gripen E begins to make unusually strong sense. This is especially true when you place the aircraft in the harsh reality of Canada's Arctic and northern frontier. Few environments on Earth are as unforgiving as northern Canada, and fewer still are compatible with high-performance fighter aircraft. Icy runways, blowing snow, 40-degree temperatures, and unpredictable storms challenge even the toughest machines. Yet this is exactly where the Gripen E stands out. Designed by a country with its own history of snow, cold, and remote air bases, the Gripen E was built with Arctic performance as a core requirement, not an add-on. Sweden's military doctrine is rooted in dispersed operations. Aircraft must take off from narrow roads, operate from makeshift bases, and receive maintenance in small teams rather than massive U.S.-style infrastructure. Canada faces similar conditions in its northern regions. The ability to use smaller runways, highways, or quickly prepared strips gives Canada operational flexibility far beyond what traditional fighter jets can offer. And unlike many larger aircraft that struggle in extreme temperatures, the Gripen E was engineered to operate in precisely these Nordic conditions. But Arctic performance is only the beginning. For Canadians in the 40 to 65 age bracket, people who remember debates around budgets, taxes, and long-term public spending, operating cost matters just as much as raw performance. One of the Gripen E's strongest advantages is its low cost per flight hour. While many advanced jets require complex maintenance crews, extensive spare parts chains, and highly specialized climate-controlled hangars, the Gripen E was intentionally designed to be inexpensive to operate. Swedish engineers embraced a philosophy built around simplicity, maintainability, and long-term affordability. In other words, it aligns perfectly with Canadian expectations: practical, cost-effective, and good value for taxpayer dollars. Every hour in the air counts, and every hour on the ground waiting for service costs money. Gripen E's maintenance model is unlike that of most Western fighter jets. Instead of requiring teams of dozens, it can be turned around by small crews in very short time frames. Canada's military cannot always rely on massive bases or easy-to-access parts depots, especially when defending remote northern regions. The Gripen E's ability to be serviced in austere, remote conditions means Canada would no longer need to rely heavily on foreign contractors or specialized support from outside the country. This independence resonates strongly with Canadians who value national sovereignty not only in politics, but in practical capability. Another compelling advantage is the potential for Canadian industry. Canada has a long history of aerospace excellence, from Bombardier and Pratt & Whitney Canada to MDA, CAE, Magellan, and a wide network of highly skilled manufacturing and engineering firms. A fighter program built around the Gripen E could include final assembly in Canada, technology transfer, software collaboration, and decades of skilled jobs across provinces like Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and British Columbia. For Canadians aged 40 to 65, many of whom saw the rise and fall of domestic aerospace projects, the prospect of revitalizing the industry with a long-term, sustainable program has undeniable appeal. This is not just about buying an aircraft. It's about investing in Canadian capability, Canadian workers, and Canadian sovereignty. Beyond economics and production, Scandinavian technology carries a particular reputation: reliability, efficiency, and trustworthiness. Canadians know the reputation of Swedish engineering: Volvo, Saab Automobile, Scania, Ericsson, brands built not on flash, but on durability and smart design. The Gripen E follows the same tradition. Swedish engineers prioritize systems that work in the real world, not only in perfect laboratory conditions. And much like Canadians, Swedes understand what it means to operate in harsh weather, long winters, and isolated environments. Many Canadians in the 40-65 demographic will instinctively recognize this shared mindset. There is also the broader question of continental defense. As NORAD transitions into its next generation, often referred to as NORAD 2.0, Canada will need aircraft that integrate seamlessly into early warning systems, Arctic surveillance networks, and joint response capabilities. Gripen E is already built to work within complex data environments and can operate in advanced electronic landscapes with efficiency and precision. Its sensor fusion, communication systems, and electronic warfare capabilities allow it to not only fit into NORAD, but potentially enhance its long-range detection and threat response architecture. In a continent as large and strategically important as North America, having an aircraft that strengthens early warning and Arctic monitoring is invaluable. Finally, the Gripen E embodies a design philosophy that resonates deeply with the Canadian public: simple, effective, and practical. Whereas some fighters are built around the idea of maximizing complexity, Gripen E is built around maximizing usability. Everything inside the aircraft, from the cockpit interface to the software architecture, centers on the pilot's needs. Tasks are simplified, information is organized intuitively, and the system adapts to new threats rather than overwhelming the pilot with unnecessary complexity. This approach mirrors the Canadian preference for tools and technology that simply work, day after day, year after year. Taken together, these elements create a picture of a fighter aircraft uniquely aligned with Canada's geography, economy, and values. It is an Arctic-ready, cost-efficient, easy-to-maintain aircraft that can be supported by Canadian workers, strengthen NORAD's mission, and reflect the Scandinavian tradition of practical, human-centered engineering. For many Canadians, especially those between 40 and 65 who value long-term logic over flashy sales pitches, the Gripen E stands out not because it is exotic, but because it is familiar. A tool built for the real world, for real conditions, and for real national needs. As Canada continues to rethink its role in Arctic security, technological independence, and long-term strategic planning, the Gripen E raises questions that go well beyond typical fighter jet comparisons. At its core, the conversation isn't just about which aircraft has the highest top speed or the longest weapons list. It's about which aircraft aligns with Canada's identity, geography, and future. For many experts, the Gripen E represents a rare alignment of all three. One of the areas where this becomes particularly clear is how the aircraft handles maintenance. Canadians between the ages of 40 and 65 have lived through decades of discussions about government spending, procurement overruns, and equipment that is too complex or too expensive to maintain. They remember stories of helicopters grounded for parts, patrol aircraft waiting months for servicing, and fleets that cost far more to operate than originally projected. The Gripen E was designed to address exactly these kinds of concerns. In Sweden, dispersed operations require jets to be maintained quickly by small teams, even conscripted mechanics, in cold weather, under tight time constraints. That ethos is remarkably consistent with Canada's own needs, especially outside major bases. Instead of requiring specialized crews or enormous maintenance halls, the Gripen E is intentionally simple to service. Panels open easily, electronic systems are modular, and engines can be removed or inspected without exotic tools. For Canada, this translates into something incredibly valuable: sovereignty. Rather than relying on foreign contractors or highly restricted maintenance protocols, Canadian technicians could maintain the aircraft on home soil, using Canadian-built components, under Canadian control. For taxpayers, this means less dependency and lower long-term costs. For defense planners, it means flexibility during emergency situations or Arctic deployments. Closely connected to maintenance is the question of operational resilience. Most modern fighter jets are built to operate from massive air bases with specialized equipment, sheltered hangars, and long runways. Canada has a few of those, but its northern regions are filled with short runways, gravel strips, and remote airfields that were never designed for large, heavy aircraft. The Gripen E, however, takes off and lands on runways far shorter than those required by most Western fighters. This is not a minor detail. It directly impacts Canada's ability to defend its own territory. In a real-world emergency, jets must be able to disperse, relocate, and operate from any available airstrip. The Gripen E makes this possible, even in harsh winter conditions. For many Canadians, particularly older ones who value practical infrastructure solutions, this is a refreshing change. Instead of requiring Canada to reshape its geography to fit a jet, the jet is capable of adapting to Canada's geography. And that adaptability extends beyond the physical environment to the digital domain. The Gripen E's sensors and communication systems are built for modern warfare, but also for cooperation. In a world where NORAD is evolving into a more integrated early warning network, the Gripen E fits naturally into joint operations. Its data links, electronic warfare capabilities, and sensor fusion systems allow it to exchange information quickly with ground radar, naval vessels, unmanned systems, and allied aircraft. For Canada, which is responsible for monitoring enormous stretches of Arctic airspace, rapid information sharing is essential. Aircraft must not only detect threats, but must also relay them across long distances in cold conditions, where satellites, radars, and sensors may be impacted by magnetic or environmental interference. The Gripen E's Scandinavian roots again play a role here. Sweden's defense environment includes dense forests, rugged coastlines, and long winter nights, all conditions that challenge traditional sensor systems. As a result, Swedish engineers developed sensors capable of distinguishing real targets from noise, clutter, and extreme weather distortions. Canada faces similar challenges, particularly in the far north, where wind, ice crystals, solar flares, and temperature inversions can weaken or confuse detection systems. Yet another dimension where the Gripen E aligns with Canadian expectations is transparency and accessibility. Many modern fighter jets are so classified that even long-term partners struggle to get access to software, systems, or maintenance tools. The Gripen E, by contrast, was built around the idea that sovereign nations should control their own defense assets. For a country like Canada, where accountability, oversight, and transparency are essential public values, this is a powerful advantage. The ability to update software domestically, maintain hardware independently, and integrate Canadian-made technologies speaks to a national desire for autonomy. Public trust is stronger when the equipment belongs fully to the nation, not partially to foreign suppliers. For Canadians aged 40 to 65, who have lived through decades of evolving defense policies, this kind of independence feels not only desirable but necessary. They have seen how dependence on foreign technology can limit national decision-making. A jet that gives Canada full access to its systems resonates deeply with this demographic. There is also a cultural aspect to this story. Canadians and Swedes share a certain mindset, a preference for quiet competence, reliability, and practical solutions over flashy displays or aggressive rhetoric. The Gripen E does not market itself as the most glamorous jet in the world. It markets itself as the most sensible one, a fighter that works every day, in every season, with straightforward maintenance, predictable costs, and modern capability. This understated confidence is something Canadian viewers immediately recognize and respect. But perhaps the most compelling argument for the Gripen E, especially for a mature Canadian audience, is how well it fits into the long-term vision for the nation. Canada is not looking for a fighter jet that dominates headlines for a year. It is looking for a system that will carry the country into the next 30 to 40 years of northern defense. Climate change is reshaping the Arctic. Trade routes are shifting. Global interest in the North is increasing. Canada needs an aircraft that can stay operational, affordable, and effective over decades, not just during the initial procurement phase. The Gripen E, with its scalable architecture, open software, modular components, and ability to evolve, is built exactly for that type of long-term horizon. In many ways, the Gripen E represents the same principles that Canadians value in their own national character: practicality, responsibility, adaptability, and a quiet but unwavering commitment to protecting what matters. It is an aircraft shaped by a climate similar to Canada's, supported by an industry with compatible values, and offering capabilities tailored to the specific needs of a nation with vast distances and harsh winters. Its appeal is not emotional. It is rational. It is grounded in geography, economics, engineering, and the lived experience of generations of Canadians who understand that the best tools are the ones that work reliably, not just the ones with the flashiest features. As Canada looks toward the future, one of the defining questions is not simply what aircraft the country should purchase, but what kind of air force Canada wants to build for the next half-century. For Canadians aged 40 to 65, citizens who have seen decades of shifting budgets, regional debates, and changing geopolitical realities, there is a growing understanding that long-term value matters more than political trends or defense headlines. In this context, the Gripen E stands out because its greatest strengths are the same qualities Canada needs for the future: Arctic resilience, affordability, independence, and adaptability. One of the most meaningful aspects often overlooked in procurement debates is how an aircraft fits into Canada's unique cultural relationship with its own geography. The North is not an abstract idea for Canadians. It represents natural beauty, vulnerability, and national identity. It is a region where equipment must work reliably for months at a time, where infrastructure is sparse, and where temperature extremes shape every decision. Canada's northern communities understand that technology built for warm climates often struggles in the Arctic. Canadians between 40 and 65 lived through multiple examples of military equipment: vehicles, aircraft, electronics, that performed poorly in the cold or required costly modifications. This is where the Gripen E's Scandinavian DNA becomes especially relevant. Swedish engineers did not treat cold weather as a secondary challenge. They treated it as the starting point. Gripen E was designed to operate year-round in icy conditions, with systems tested to ensure reliability long after temperatures fall below levels that shut down sensitive electronics or hydraulic components. Even basic operations, opening panels, checking connections, handling tools, were optimized for winter conditions. For Canada's northern bases, this translates directly into higher readiness, fewer delays, and far less strain on logistics teams already stretched thin. Equally important is the role of northern infrastructure. While some fighter jets require large, specialized hangars and long runways to function properly, many northern Canadian runways are short, remote, and sometimes only seasonally maintained. Gripen E is optimized for short takeoffs and landings, and its rugged landing gear is designed for roads, makeshift runways, and frozen surfaces. For Canadians who appreciate infrastructure that works in all seasons, this is a powerful advantage. Instead of requiring costly upgrades to remote runways, the Gripen E adapts to the infrastructure Canada already has. Beyond climate and geography, the financial implications of Canada's next fighter jet cannot be ignored. Canadians between 40 and 65 have witnessed decades of cost overruns, maintenance scandals, procurement delays, and budget adjustments. They expect accountability, especially when billions in tax dollars are on the line. Gripen E's operating cost, which is significantly lower than that of many other advanced jets, reflects a practical philosophy. It was built by a country that could not afford excessive spending and therefore focused on designing a jet that is efficient in both performance and cost of operation. For Canadian taxpayers, this translates into long-term savings that can be redirected toward Arctic infrastructure, search and rescue capability, and domestic industry growth. And this naturally leads into another area critical for Canadian viewers: jobs and economic opportunity. Unlike aircraft built under restrictive maintenance rules controlled by foreign companies, the Gripen E is built around openness. It allows local assembly, local maintenance, and local software integration. This opens the door for Canadian aerospace workers to take on leadership roles in technology development, advanced manufacturing, and long-term servicing. Aerospace hubs in Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, and Vancouver could benefit from thousands of high-skilled, high-paying jobs that last decades, the kind of sustainable industrial growth Canadians value. Older Canadians, in particular, appreciate when a defense investment supports their communities, their industries, and their younger generations. A Gripen E program in Canada could become a pipeline for apprenticeships, engineering training, graduate research, and long-term technological expertise. In a world where manufacturing capability is increasingly vital, maintaining sovereign control over aircraft maintenance is not just a technical advantage. It is a national asset. The alignment between Canadian and Swedish values strengthens this argument even further. Both nations value transparency, accountability, and practical engineering. Both believe in reliability over marketing hype, and both share a cautious, measured approach to defense, not as a symbol of aggression, but as a tool to safeguard people and territory. In this cultural sense, Gripen E feels like a natural fit for Canada's identity. Of course, modern defense is not only about individual aircraft. It is about networks, digital networks, surveillance networks, and early warning systems that span vast regions. Canada and the United States are now actively modernizing NORAD, a crucial step as the Arctic becomes increasingly active and contested. Canada needs aircraft capable of working seamlessly within next-generation NORAD architecture, sharing data, interpreting signals, resisting electronic interference, and supporting long-range detection. Gripen E was built with this kind of environment in mind. Its advanced sensors and electronic warfare systems were designed to handle complex, cluttered signal environments under harsh weather conditions. For the Canadian public, especially those aged 40 to 65 who understand the importance of deep cooperation with the United States, this compatibility matters. It reflects a balanced approach, protecting sovereignty while strengthening continental defense. Gripen E offers Canada the ability to participate fully in NORAD modernization while maintaining greater independence in maintenance, software control, and operational decisions. Perhaps the most compelling reason the Gripen E resonates with Canadians, however, is its long-term philosophy. It is not a jet designed for a narrow window of threats. It is a jet built to evolve. With modular hardware, open software architecture, and the ability to integrate new technologies quickly, the Gripen E is prepared for a world where threats change rapidly. For a country with Canada's long procurement cycles, where equipment often stays in service for 40 years, this adaptability is essential. It means the aircraft will remain relevant and capable long after the world has changed around it. In many ways, Gripen E is more than a fighter jet for Canada. It is a strategic partnership with a country whose engineering philosophy mirrors Canada's values. It is an investment in Arctic security, economic sovereignty, national workforce development, and long-term stability. And it is a recognition that the best defense tools are not always the ones marketed as the most glamorous. They are the ones that fit the land, the people, and the mission. For Canadians between 40 and 65, this perspective carries significant weight. They have lived through cycles of procurement promises and disappointments. They know that Canada needs a fighter built not for someone else's climate, someone else's doctrine, or someone else's political agenda, but for Canada's own geography, economy, and future. The Gripen E embodies this idea. It is built for cold weather, built for long distances, built for reliability, built for sovereign control, and ultimately, built for countries that value practicality, independence, and long-term strength. Thank you for watching and spending your time with this deep dive into Canada's future in Arctic defense and the remarkable capabilities of the Gripen E. If you found this video thoughtful, informative, or simply worth your time, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating high-quality content that respects your intelligence and brings meaningful conversations to Canadians who care about our country's future. I'd love to hear your perspective as well. To keep the discussion going, here are a few questions for you to think about and share in the comments. Which capability do you believe matters most for Canada's next fighter? Arctic performance, low operating cost, or maintenance independence? Do you think Canada should focus more on building aerospace jobs at home when choosing its next aircraft? How important is long-term sovereignty to you when it comes to Canada's defense systems? Feel free to leave your thoughts, stories, or even just a quick hello. I read every comment. Thank you again for being here, and I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in this great country.